The video which you are about to see is an account of the task taken on by multiple YouTubers, in particular, Nick Hernandez and his adorable dog, Rocky. It is all the more tragic in that they had nothing better to do. But had they lived very, very exciting lives, they could not have expected, nor would they have wished to see as many shitty sequels and convoluted timelines as they were about to see that week. For them, a seemingly simple video topic became a time-consuming headache. The events of that day were to lead to the ranking of one of the most bizarre franchises in the annals of American cinema, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
I'm back and I'm better than ever. That's for my wrestling fans, you get the reference. But yes, I am back with a new video. It's been a while since I've done one of these videos for a multitude of reasons, but I'm back. If you see my other videos, you can clearly tell this isn't my usual setup. That's because I moved, so I haven't really set up everything the way that I want to yet, but hopefully this will do. Today we're gonna be talking about this guy right here, Leatherface. Look at him, look it up. You can even see Leatherface back here. I don't know if you could really tell, but he's right there. Love that poster. It's actually signed by Doug Bradley, who played Pinhead. So that's pretty cool. As some of you know, we have a new Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie that came out a little while ago on Netflix. And so I decided to rank each and every film in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre franchise. There's some good ones, there's some shitty ones, but we're gonna talk about all of them. 9 films in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre franchise, from least favorite to favorite. Probably not hard to guess which one's gonna make number 1, but what about the rest? Let's see. And yes, I know the movie came out a while ago, so I probably should have had this video done already, but who gives a shit? I'm doing it, right? You get in the video. Let's do this. Coming in at number 9, to nobody's surprise, is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Next Generation, the 4th film in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre franchise. I know there's some people out here that actually like this movie for how ridiculous and over the top it is, but I don't. I'm sorry. I'm one of the many people that thinks this movie is just utter trash. Like, this movie is garbage. I get it. If you turn your brain off, it's fun to make fun of and it's ridiculous and over the top, but it just doesn't do it for me. I might sound like a hypocrite because there's another movie in this franchise and movies in other franchises that are kind of similar to this with their campy tone, and I like those movies, but to me it's all about intention. This movie doesn't feel like it's intentionally cheesy, intentionally over the top. It just feels like it was bad writing, bad filmmaking. This movie's directed by Kim Henkel, if I'm pronouncing that right, who co-wrote the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre with Tobe Hooper. So you would think that this would come out good. This is the guy who made the masterpiece of the original film. But honestly, there's like no redeeming qualities. Okay, there's one redeeming quality about this film, and that's Matthew McConaughey. The dude is unhinged, and I love it. He's the only part of the movie that entertains me at all. Renee Zellweger, okay, her performance is pretty shitty, but to be fair, it's kind of entertaining too. There's one line in the movie where she tells Leatherface,
"I'm gonna leave, and no one is gonna stop me." You sit the fuck down! Shut up!
I die laughing every time I see that scene. That's actually hilarious to me. This film is just so poorly made. There's a scene when Renee Zellweger's character falls over, and when she gets up, you can see knee pads on her. And it's not intentional, she's wearing a prom dress. This is just bad filmmaking. They didn't cover up the fact that the actress was wearing knee pads. Spoiler, we get like a little cameo from Marilyn Burns at the end of this movie in the hospital, supposedly playing Sally again, and just doesn't make any sense. It's just so weird and random, and they never continue that storyline, so I don't know what they were doing there, but whatever. But anyways, I spent enough time on this crappy movie. If you like it, everyone's opinion is valid, and I understand it, I get it. It's over the top and fun, I guess, if you turn your brain off, but I just can't stand it. The acting is atrocious, the writing is atrocious, the ending, I'm not gonna go into too much spoilers, but if you've seen the movie, you know how it ends. It's ridiculous. Garbage, my least favorite. I'd give it maybe 1.5 stars out of 5. Coming in at number 8, also to no one's surprise, Texas Chainsaw 3D. Talk about a garbage movie. Yet another one that's just awful. Now, before I start shitting on this movie, I am gonna give it a little bit of credit. Texas Chainsaw 3D is one of the early examples of a requel. It did it before Halloween, before Scream, before Candyman, and they had a pretty good idea of continuing it from the original film. In fact, the beginning where they kind of recreate the setting of the original film and they continue from the ending of that movie where they have Gunnar Hansen come back and Marilyn Burns playing different characters, as well as Bill Moseley coming back, this time playing the cook instead of Chop Top. I actually really like that scene. It's kind of weird seeing Leatherface have a bunch of family members that weren't in the original film, but whatever, I'm used to that from all the other sequels where he suddenly has all these new family members. And the way that Leatherface looks, I mean, it's the same look that he had at the end of the original film, and I thought it looked great. But that's kind of where it ends. Slight spoilers for the movie. The main character, played by Alexandra Daddario, is a baby at the end of that scene that continues on from the original film. That takes place in 1973, right? The original movie came out in 74, but the movie took place in 73. This movie, Texas Chainsaw 3D, takes place in 2013. So if you do the math, if Alexandra Daddario's character is a baby in 73, 2013, that's 40 years later. She's 40 years old. Now, you really mean to tell me that Alexandra Daddario is 40 years old in that movie? Come on, there's no fucking way. And look, I like Alexandra Daddario as an actor, but even she's not good in this. All of the acting in this movie is terrible. Leatherface looks bad, the writing's bad. This movie was made in 3D, so all the gore is not even good. The gore is all digital blood and just looks super fake and cheap. Don't even get me started on Trey Songz. The writing's so bad that there's a character in this movie who's not from Texas who shouts to Leatherface, who is from Texas,
Welcome to Texas, motherfucker!
"Welcome to Texas, motherfucker." What? Just like The Next Generation, this is another movie that some people really love. They love the campiness of it. They love the stupidity of it. They just have fun with it. And that's great. There's, like I said, there's a bunch of movies that I feel the same way about that I know are garbage, but they're fun to watch. Unfortunately, this and The Next Generation just aren't two of them. So I'm also gonna rate this 1.5 stars. I will say, the whole "do your thing, cuz,"
Do your thing, cuz.
it's grown on me. It's funny, I like it, whatever. That's all I gotta say about Texas Chainsaw 3D, so let's move on. Now we move on to number 7, which is Leatherface, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Part 3. I know most people don't really care for this movie, and for a long time I didn't either, but over the last couple of rewatches, it's kind of grown on me. Now don't get me wrong, it's still middle of the road, it's still tame, but I don't know, I find enjoyment out of it. Ken Foray and Viggo Mortensen are both good in this, and I think that the film plays with our expectations quite a bit in the movie. Spoilers for this movie. We meet Tex early on, played by Viggo Mortensen, and we are led to believe that he's the good guy, and then of course he ends up being with Leatherface's family. And then later on we meet this little girl who we think is a victim of Leatherface's family, and she turns out to be Leatherface's daughter. I don't know about you, but I didn't see that coming, and I thought that was a pretty cool twist. Like I mentioned before, the film is pretty tame, so if you're going into this expecting a lot of crazy gore, you're not getting that. The MPAA, as they're prone to do, completely neutered this movie. That being said, there is some gore in it. I mean, there's a severed head in the movie that one of Leatherface's family members is holding up and talking to. I thought that was pretty sick. But yes, most of the time they do seem to cut away from the gore a lot, which is annoying. But if you go into that knowing it, I think the rest of the movie is strong enough and entertaining enough that it doesn't really matter. I think the ending is really fun. The fight between Ken Foray and Viggo Mortensen is entertaining. I found it funny when Ken Foray's character tells Viggo Mortensen's character,
"What the fuck is wrong with you? Why don't you leave us alone? You're hungry. Never heard of pizza?"
"Never heard of pizza?" That line just cracks me up. It's stupid, it's cheesy, but I love it. Now, unfortunately, this is the sequel where the continuity of the franchise just kind of completely goes to shit. This is titled Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, yet if you've seen the second movie and how that ended, it's kind of impossible for Leatherface to be in this movie. So overall, Leatherface, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3 is kind of middle of the road, but I like it. Some people consider this to be a part of the bad sequels, but I don't, and even if I did, I think this is the best of the bad sequels. I enjoy all the Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies except the last two I just spoke about to various degrees, but they're all entertaining to me. So even though this one is kind of middle in the road, I like it. I'm gonna rate Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, a solid 3 stars. If you haven't seen it in a while, check it out again. Throw out your expectations and you might just enjoy this one. Coming in at number 6 is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Beginning. This is the prequel to the remake that came out after the remake. So it's a sequel to the remake, but it's a prequel, but not to the original film, but to the remake. You get it. But with all that being said, this doesn't really feel like a Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie. Now let me explain. The movie itself fits in really well with the remake, and in fact this movie feels even grittier than the remake. The remake felt more shiny. This felt really nasty and dirty like the original film. This movie's also super gory, way gorier than the remake, way gorier than the original, and that really rubbed some people wrong at the time of the movie came out. But it makes sense. I mean, this came out in 2006. This is around the time of the whole torture porn era, which I don't like that term, but it's always really popular at this time. Hostel, all those types of really gory, over the top, brutal movies. So this being in that same vein makes sense. This doesn't really feel like a Leatherface prequel, and that's probably why a lot of people don't like this movie. Leatherface doesn't really become Leatherface until the third act, and he's kind of absent from a lot of this movie. So the way I look at it is, if you watch this movie as a Sheriff Hoyt prequel with Leatherface as a side character, it's so much more enjoyable. Because that's essentially what this movie is. A great deal of it is just Sheriff Hoyt terrorizing our main characters. We learn his backstory, how he became the sheriff, how the whole Leatherface family formed through him. And I really like those prequel elements. It really adds to the remake, because we'll get to the remake, but there were certain things that were missing from the remake that I think this enhanced. We actually get a dinner scene with the whole family at the end of this movie, which we didn't get in the remake, so that was really welcome for me. And speaking of the ending, the last 30 minutes are gnarly. Blood and guts and just brutality throughout the whole last 30 minutes with Leatherface as the central focus. That's the part of the movie I think a lot of people love, because it's just insane Leatherface carnage. They get into this car crash, and then Jordana Brewster is absent for like the rest of the movie until the third act, so structurally it's kind of weird considering she's our final girl, so I can understand why some people didn't really like that. But I really like all the performances. I think there's some humor in here that works. There's some horror, some tension, some brutality. Leatherface having kind of the half a mask thing before he gets his first human mask, I think looks pretty cool. And I mean, come on, Arlie Ermey as Sheriff Hoyt, what can I really say? Dude is just top level. Overall, I really like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre at the beginning. Like I said, thinking of it as a Sheriff Hoyt prequel with Leatherface as a side character makes it so much more enjoyable. It's super brutal, super entertaining in those last 30 minutes. Arlie Ermey as Sheriff Hoyt is great. The rest of the performances are solid. It's a pretty good movie. It's a little slow at one point, kind of slows down, but overall, I really enjoy it. I'll give it 3.5 stars. And here we are, we're in the top 5 of my favorite Texas Chainsaw Massacre films. And this one might be controversial because the film is so divisive since it's come out, but it's my opinion. I don't give a shit. I liked it. You know what it is, it's Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2022, the new one that's on Netflix. Now, I will say, when I first saw the movie, I didn't love it. I liked it, I enjoyed it, I thought the killings were good, the gore, I found it entertaining, but some of the writing choices and some of the character choices, I wasn't so sure about. To me, when I first saw this felt like Halloween Kills, a movie that I really am not that big of a fan of. They both felt like overly gory legacy requels with interesting themes that suffered from a severely underdeveloped script, aka bad writing. Now, upon rewatch of Halloween Kills, I still feel that way. But upon rewatch of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I don't, not as much at least. I still have mixed feelings about how they handle Sally Hardesty, but I saw someone's review where they mentioned that this kind of felt like a parody of these recent requels like Halloween. So viewing it in that lens, I actually think it's kind of funny. Spoiler alert, when Sally Hardesty is introduced and she first confronts Leatherface, we all suspect that they're gonna have this big showdown and she's gonna be the central focus. And if you've seen the movie, again, spoiler, that's far from the truth. She gets murdered pretty quickly and pretty brutally. And the way she just gets pulled up with the chainsaw and thrown to the side actually kind of feels kind of humorous if you view it with that satirical lens. And now the reason why this movie is so divisive is that there's some people out there that feel like this movie is too woke, that it's too focused on social issues. Well, I hate to break it to you, but horror has always revolved around social issues. This ain't nothing new. I can understand if you feel like it's a little ham-fisted and not subtle, but to me, the themes felt relevant and they didn't feel preachy. They might feel preachy when you first watch it, but then you realize that we're actually supposed to hate the main characters. We want to see them get killed because they're so self-righteous. And I'm not going to get into politics or anything like that, but two different sides are represented in this movie, and I think that we're supposed to sympathize with both sides, but also hate both sides, if that makes any sense. So it's not choosing choosing a side. And that may bother people. People might think that this film should choose a side, but to me, I don't care. This is a slasher movie. We come here to see people get killed, and that's what we got. And those kills are brutal. The bus scene, which is also controversial because of the whole cell phone, you're gonna get canceled, bro, whatever the line is. Guys, it's 2022. If you really think that people wouldn't be taking out their cell phones, if you've been living under a rock, have you not seen social media? That's what people do. Instead of handling the situation, the first thing they do is TikTok, world star. So it didn't bother me. I thought it was a funny moment, and guess what? All those people on the bus got murdered. They got massacred. Yes, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie has a massacre. Who would have thought? And the massacre is brutal. There's blood and guts, and there's also some subliminal imagery in the windows. If you pause through each frame of the scene, Leatherface's adoptive mother or foster mother or whatever is actually flashed on the window scenes. So look back at that next time you watch it and really look closely, and you'll see that. But yeah, that scene is so fun. People getting chopped in half through the window, and it's just, I enjoy it, man. It's, as a slasher film, that's one of the most fun slasher scenes that I've ever seen. Even that first kill in the movie, which I won't spoil, is insane, and one of my favorite kills that I've probably ever seen. I thought it was super creative. Now, I don't like that they kind of don't explain certain things, like what happened to the cook after the original film and how Leatherface just suddenly ended up in a foster home. But speaking of the foster home element, I actually like the fact that they try to make Leatherface a little bit more sympathetic, because he kind of was in the original film. Yes, this is a crazy guy killing people, but in the original film, he was protecting himself. At least that's how it kind of is implied. The kids in the original film enter his home and he gets scared and he murders them. He's also a product of his environment and the way he was raised by his family. His foster mother in this movie didn't raise him that way. That's why he went almost 50 years without killing anybody. But then when these kids come in and they invade his home again and they cause the death of the one person that was treating him well, he became unloose, he became unhinged. So I like that. It felt like a callback to the original. So if you couldn't tell, I'm a fan of this movie. I was a little mixed on it when I first saw it, but it's really warmed up to me. I think it's brutal, emotional, and fun as hell. And the themes that are presented in here are relevant. The school shootings, I mean, I don't have to tell you, we all went through it in the last 10, 15, 20 years, and it may be a little too close to home. I get that. Horror movies are supposed to be escapism, but I like when slashers or horror movies in general have something deeper. It's not like Halloween where they had that whole mob mentality subplot that just, I don't know, it just didn't work for me. I don't think it was written well. Evil dies tonight. Evil dies tonight 20 times. Get out of here. I think this film will be looked upon a little bit more positively in the future. It kind of makes me think of Scream 4, which when that came out, people kind of just dismissed it and didn't really like it. And now my generation loves Scream 4. That movie has gotten a reappraisal in the last few years. And I think that's because that movie was kind of ahead of its time with the social media stuff and the wanting the fame and this, that, and the other. Yeah, social media was a thing back then, but wanting to have social media fame and all of that, that's super relevant now, more than it was in 2011 with TikTok and people wanting to get famous off of stupid viral videos, and now people love Scream 4. So maybe it'll be the same with this movie in a few years when people rewatch it. So I'm gonna rate Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2022 4 stars. I really hope we get a sequel to this movie. If you stayed past the credits, you'll see that there was a post-credit scene that teases something for the future. So I would like to see what this director can do with it. I think Fede Alvarez produced this movie well, and I'm excited for the future of this franchise. It apparently did well on Netflix, so hopefully we'll get that sequel. All right, now I said the last one was controversial, but this is gonna be controversial. If you've been paying attention, there's one film that a lot of Texas Chainsaw Massacre fans don't like that I haven't mentioned yet, and that film is Leatherface. No, not Leatherface Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 3, just simply Leatherface, because this franchise doesn't know how to title their freaking movies. Now, Leatherface is another prequel. We talked about Texas Chainsaw Massacre at the beginning, which was a prequel to the remake. Leatherface is a prequel to the original, but it's in the same timeline as Texas Chainsaw 3D, which was a direct sequel to the original that retconned the rest of the movies. So this is a prequel to the original, but a prequel sequel to 3D, whatever. Like I said, this whole franchise's continuity is just fucking whatever. It's worse than Halloween, and Halloween is garbage, continuity wise. But yeah, a lot of people don't like this movie, and I guess I'm just one of the few people who do. It's my opinion. I don't give a shit. I love it. Is it a good Texas Chainsaw Massacre prequel? Well, that's debatable, and I certainly understand the argument that it's not. But as a standalone kind of fugitives on the run film, I think it really fucking rocks. And the Leatherface connection is just a cherry on top for me. Now, spoiler for this movie. If you've seen it, you know that there's 3 male characters that they kind of try to make you think one person's Leatherface, and then they try to make you think, no, that person's Leatherface, because his name was changed when he entered the mental hospital. These kids were taken from their homes, put into a mental hospital, and then their names were changed. So we don't know which one is supposed to be Leatherface. And of course, they have one kid that's a little, you know, a little chubby, a little big, and we're supposed to automatically associate him with Leatherface's physical appearance. Of course, it ends up not being that guy, and it ends up being our main character, who's this skinny, good-looking dude, complete opposite of what we would think Leatherface is. But then in the end, something happens to his face, which explains why he starts wearing masks to cover up his face, human masks. And speaking of that actor, I think he's good in this. I think all the performances are good, and I think he has good chemistry with the nurse, his love interest. There's 2 other characters, kind of this one crazy guy and his crazy blonde girlfriend. I think they're really entertaining. There's a diner scene in this that I think is kind of suspenseful and over-the-top violent that I really enjoyed. Steven Dorff is in this, and he's good, and I like his story where Leatherface killed his daughter and he's out for revenge. They could have done a little bit more with that part of the storyline, but I like how it worked out and worked into all of the main story. Lily Taylor as Verna Sawyer, she's great. I think she's good in this too. And much like the previous prequel that we got, the last 30 minutes are the most Texas Chainsaw Massacre feeling. The rest of the movie doesn't feel that way. And so again, just like that one, I understand why that might rub some people the wrong way, but I really like this movie. I think it's really fun, really entertaining, bloody, suspenseful at times. I think it's fun, man. Just throw away your expectations of this being a Leatherface Texas Chainsaw Massacre prequel and just enjoy it as a Fugitives on the Run thriller. But I know I'm in the minority. A lot of people rank this dead last or in the last few spots on their rankings, but not me. I love this movie. I give it 4 stars. That's right, you heard that shit right. Now we're in the top 3, and coming in at number 3 is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake from 2003. This is another entry in the franchise that's kind of divisive, but I think this one has grown on a lot of people in recent years. I think this remake is brutal, intense, and feels like its own thing while also paying homage to the original masterpiece. Now, when I reviewed the latest Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie, I mentioned how I like the fact that they made Leatherface sympathetic. This movie doesn't really do that, and I wish that they did because, like I said, I felt like he was sympathetic in the original film, and that's kind of a really important trait for Leatherface, and they kind of just put that to the side for this movie. There's also a couple things that aren't really explained, like why his family even kills and how they came together and their dynamics. But we get some of those answers in the prequel, like I mentioned before. But I do wish that we would have gotten it in this movie. It would have made this already great movie even better. We also don't get a dinner scene like we typically would, but again, we end up getting that in the prequel. I think all the performances are good, including Jessica Biel. In fact, I wish we would have gotten a direct sequel with Jessica Biel coming back. I mean, come on. This whole franchise's continuity is shit anyway, so fuck it, why not? Let's just get a sequel with Jessica Biel coming back in this timeline and still continue the new timeline and do another sequel, another prequel. Who cares? Let's just do it. And I don't even got to talk about Arlie Ermey. I already talked about him earlier. He's just as good in this as he was in the prequel. He's unhinged. He just completely eats up this role. God, that dude is just such a great actor. He completely just devours this role. So yeah, I think this movie is one of the best remakes we've ever gotten. Can't say it's the best because there are others that I like a lot. And then there's movies like The Thing, which are technically a remake, I guess. And that movie's a fucking masterpiece. So I can't quite say this is the best remake we got. But out of all like the Platinum Dune movies we got in the early 2000s, this gotta be the best one, right? So as you can tell, I'm a big fan of this movie, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake from 2003. I'm gonna give it 4.5 stars. Near perfect. We would have learned a little bit more about the family's motivations, and if we would have gotten maybe a dinner scene at the end, I think this movie would have been perfect. And this movie is a little bit more polished than the original in terms of like the visuals, but I think it's still pretty gritty and it kind of harkens back to the feel of the original in certain ways. So yeah, if it's been a while since you've seen this one and you don't really remember it that fondly, revisit it, man, because this one's damn good. Number 2 is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2. And yet another divisive movie in this franchise. Now, when I spoke about The Next Generation, my least favorite film in this franchise, I mentioned the fact that that film didn't feel intentional when it came to its cheesiness and its over-the-top ridiculousness. This movie feels intentional. It feels like Tobe Hooper said, okay, it's 14 years since I made the original, a movie that people praise. Now they want me to make a sequel. What can I do? You know what? Fuck it, I could do whatever I want. I'm gonna make a parody of the original film. And that's exactly what he did. This movie is fucking bonkers. I mean, let's just talk about Chop Top. Bill Moseley as Chop Top is just one of my favorite characters in this whole franchise. Dude is just ridiculous. Bill Moseley is just so good in this role. Some people might find him annoying, but I didn't. I found him pretty funny. And you want to talk about an unhinged performance, talk about Dennis Hopper in this film. Dude is bat crazy in this movie. It's just so entertaining and funny. Of course, you have Leatherface coming back, aka Bubba the Simp Sawyer. And if you've seen this movie, you know exactly why I say that, because Leatherface has a chainsaw hard-on for a stretch. Like literally, he takes his chainsaw and puts it between her legs. I mean, that's an innuendo if I've ever seen one. The entire scene at the radio station is perfection. It's so fun, so entertaining, suspenseful as well when Leatherface is going after Stretch. But then the first moment that we realize that Leatherface is attracted to Stretch completely changes the dynamic of the movie and their relationship. She recognizes the fact that he's attracted to her and she uses that to her advantage. Speaking of Stretch, I really like her as a final girl. Caroline Williams is really good in the role. We get the cook back from the original movie and he's just as crazy and kooky as he was back then. We also get the hitchhiker from this movie who they name Nubbins. It's literally just his corpse that they carry around during their murders, and it's just so funny and stupid. So I get it. Some people might feel the way I feel about Next Generation or 3D. They might feel that way about this movie, thinking that it's just stupid and comedic and over the top or whatever, but those are the elements that I love. Like I said, it feels intentional. It feels like Tobe Hooper was making fun of his own movie and doing something completely different and out of left field, and I really appreciate it for that. Whereas Texas Chainsaw 3D and the Next Generation did not feel intentional. They just felt like they were poorly made. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the perfect example of camp. A campy movie, intentionally campy. It's so much fun and I love the movie. I'm gonna give it 4.5 stars. Now finally, last but not least, the original, the OG, the masterpiece, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre from 1974, directed by the master, Tobe Hooper. Let me put this over here. Look at that beauty. Look at that beautiful steel book. I don't know if you can see it, it's the lighting, but yeah, I love that. What can I say about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre that hasn't already been said? The movie is just a masterpiece. It's dirty, it's grimy, it makes you feel disgusting and like you want to shower, and it's just, ugh. The movie just feels so visceral and so real because of the way that it's shot. It's shot like a documentary, it's low budget, and it's just grimy and nasty and disgusting. It's very unsettling, very uncomfortable, and very terrifying. I know there's some people out there that feel like this movie hasn't really aged well because of the lack of blood and the slower pace compared to modern slashers, but I disagree. I think it holds up. That dinner scene at the end, Sally tied up, all those extreme close-ups are so unsettling, especially the one of her eye. You gotta remember that this movie came out in 1974, so this is before Halloween, before Black Christmas. This movie set the standard for a lot of slasher tropes that would continue on in Black Christmas, in Halloween, and forever. And this movie doesn't really get the credit for that. Usually the credit goes to Halloween and then hardcore horror fans would give it to Black Christmas, but this came out first. This set up a lot of the tropes that we see in horror, in slasher films in the future. You have this group of kids that go to an unfamiliar place, they get picked off one by one by a killer in a mask. You have the iconic weapon with the chainsaw, we have the iconic villain, we have the final girl. All these tropes were present here in Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The lack of blood doesn't really bother me. The implied violence in this movie is what really unsettles you because it leaves it to your imagination. Another complaint that I've heard about this movie is that it's too loud, that there's a lot of screaming and that it gets annoying, but again, to me, that is unsettling. It makes me feel so uncomfortable when Sally's shrieking off the top of her head and slowly going crazy. And speaking of Sally, she's played perfectly by Marilyn Burns. We really feel for her. We feel bad for her that she's going through this torture at the end of the movie, and we really root for her to survive. Now, one person that we don't root for is Franklin, her brother. I will admit Franklin is really annoying, but I think that's kind of the point. We are supposed to want him to get killed off. And when you think about it, they kind of pull a psycho in this movie. The movie starts off focused on Franklin. We think Franklin's the main character, but it's not. Obviously, we know that now, it's Sally. But if you pay attention to the movie, it's really focused on Franklin. Franklin's the one that gets cut by the hitchhiker. Franklin's the one that we follow around and we're supposed to feel bad for, you know, because he's disabled. Back then, they kind of used that as a reason for our people to feel bad for the character, but also because people don't like him. The characters within the movie don't really like him and they leave him to himself. They go out and they do their own thing and he's not really getting any attention. So when he finally gets killed by Leatherface, we're shocked as an audience seeing this for the first time. We're like, wait, isn't he our main character? No, it's his sister Sally. But at the same time, if you're annoyed by his character, you're like, yes, finally, this dude got killed off. Chainsaw right to the chest. It's brutal. And there's no blood, but it's brutal. I mean, there's just so many beautiful shots in this movie too. My favorite probably being that iconic shot of Pam walking towards the house with the swing. And no, not for the reason you might be thinking. I just think it's a really beautiful shot. Which is weird because of the fact that this film is shot documentary style in a sense, and it's so gritty in a lot of parts of the movie. But there are some low-key gorgeous shots in this movie. And then we have to talk about the first kill in the movie. It's the first appearance of Leatherface. What I love about this scene is that it doesn't rely on music or jump scares. You just have Kirk walking towards the door, and then all of a sudden, Leatherface comes out, hits him over the head. No music, nothing. We see Kirk fall to the floor. He's twitching. It's just so unsettling seeing Kirk on the floor twitching and spasming like an animal, which of course is supposed to make us think of cattle mutilation, of slaughterhouses. They mentioned slaughterhouses in the van earlier on. Like I said about the previous films, underlying themes have never been new to horror, and it was here in the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. This is a cautionary tale. Now what it's really about is debatable, but you can think of it as commenting on veganism, commenting on the meat industry. There's so many different ways you can interpret this movie. There's definitely deeper themes in this movie. Like I mentioned before, Leatherface is kind of sympathetic in this movie. He only kills Kirk because he's scared. This guy just walked into his home, and yes, of course, somebody walks into your home, you don't automatically hit them over the head with a hammer, but that's the way he was raised, that's the way he was brought up, so that's the first thing that he does. And I love the shot where Leatherface sits down in the chair and he's going like this, and he's like, I don't know what to do, I don't know what to do. And he's stressing out about the situation. I love it because that's what really makes us feel bad for Leatherface. Yeah, he's a murderer, we're like, damn, there's something off about this guy. Like, he's not killing just to kill. Like, it creates a mystery around Leatherface. Then of course Leatherface has the different masks throughout the film. You see him dress up as like an old grandma when he's cooking for the family. You see him have like makeup in a woman's face when he's sitting down for dinner. And it's so interesting to me because it's never explained why he's wearing these different faces. We don't even know is Leatherface deformed or why he wears a mask. To me, Leatherface is living out these different roles and these different personalities by wearing each of these masks. Maybe he doesn't like his physical appearance, or maybe his physical appearance is fine and he doesn't like what's in the inside. That's what makes the character so compelling to me. And they just have not replicated that in any of the other movies. We get that shot that I was talking about, that iconic shot of Pam walking to the house. She enters in the house and then Leatherface attacks her and he puts her onto the meat hook. And we don't see the meat hook go into her body, but again, it's implied and it's so, you start feeling your back and you're just like, it's disgusting. You just, all we see is just a few splatters of blood come up, and that's all we need. And then later on, when Jerry enters the house and he finds Pam in the freezer and she pops out and her eyes are bulging, she's still alive, it's so fucking terrifying. I mean, the house is filled with all these animal parts and bones and dead bodies. Now, this film is supposedly based on a true story, which by now we all know that that's not true. It was based on the Ed Gein murders, but Leatherface obviously isn't a real person, never was. But they include those elements of Ed Gein's case. You have the house filled with animal parts and bones and human flesh and furniture made out of flesh. At the end of the movie, at the dinner scene, you have a lamp made out of a human face and just all these different furniture pieces that are made of human parts. It's disgusting. It's so fucking scary. Then of course we get the iconic ending with Sally escaping from the house, flagging down the truck driver getting attacked by Leatherface, and then the car coming by, Sally hopping in the back of it, driving away and going crazy and laughing because she's finally free, finally away from these people. And you see the iconic shot, which is showed right there on the cover, of Leatherface swinging around his chainsaw. It's iconic, man. It's so good and so terrifying. And it ends with Leatherface still out there. There's just so much we can say about this movie, and I'm sure I missed something, but hopefully you guys can understand why I love this movie so much and why it's such a classic. If you've never seen it, please do yourself a favor, go check it out. It's horror history, it's super disturbing, and look, maybe you might be one of those people who thinks it's outdated, but I hope you do watch it and I hope you do enjoy it. And even if you don't like it, well, at least you've seen one of the most iconic horror movies of all time. To me, Texas Chainsaw Massacre is arguably one of the most terrifying slashers of all time. It's definitely one of the most disturbing and probably the loudest with all the shrieking, but I think it's so effective. It's so scary, so grimy and gritty and dirty and terrifying. Leatherface is terrifying. The family is terrifying. The old man who's like, is he alive? Is he not alive? He's terrifying. The hitchhiker is nuts. The cook is nuts. Sally's great. She's a great final girl. Franklin is annoying, but we get to see him get killed. It's a classic. I love it, and it's my favorite Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie. I mean, duh, obviously that was gonna be my number one. But that's it. Hopefully I didn't miss anything substantial when I was talking about this movie, but it's a masterpiece and I love it. It's 5 stars, 5 out of 5, a perfect masterpiece. Thank you, Tobe Hooper. Even before John Carpenter, you ushered in a new era of horror movies. You created a lot of elements that we see to this day in slasher movies. And, you know, the franchise is still going. Yeah, some movies are better than others, and maybe it's not as popular as Halloween or Friday the 13th or Nightmare on Elm Street, but he's one of the OGs. That's why he's on the shirt with them. Thank you, Tobe Hooper, and rest in peace. Thank you, Kim Henkel, even though, you know, we made Next Generation, but whatever, you also had a part in this movie, so credit to you. I can't wait for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre video game that's coming out. I think that's gonna be really fun. Rest in peace, Gunnar Hansen. Rest in peace, Marilyn Burns. So sad that we lost so many people involved in this movie. But as a huge horror fan, I'm grateful that this movie was made. And that's it. That's my ranking of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre films. Do you agree with me, or you think I'm fucking crazy? Let me know in the comments. Be respectful, of course, but let me know your ranking. I'm genuinely interested in what you guys think. What's your favorite Texas Chainsaw Massacre? Which one do you think is the worst? I mean, who's your favorite character outside of Leatherface? Are you one of the people that thinks Texas Chainsaw 3D and or Next Generation are really fun and maybe I don't appreciate it as much as I should? Did you like the new Texas Chainsaw Massacre, or did you think it was trash? Let me know in the comments. Would love to hear your opinions. And don't forget to follow me on social media. I'm gonna leave all the links in the description and on screen. Follow me on Letterboxd. I review movies on there all the time. Some short reviews, some long reviews. But if you really wanna know my thoughts on every movie that I watch, practically, follow me on Letterboxd. And if you don't have Letterboxd, make an account. It's pretty fun. And of course, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment below. I really appreciate all your support. I just passed 100 followers recently, which may not seem like a lot, but it means a lot to me that you guys even care about my stupid thoughts on movies. I plan to make more videos. Hopefully, if you guys like this, you show your support so that I know that it's worth making these videos. I know it may not seem like it, but these videos take a lot of work to put together. So if you want to see more, please show support by liking, commenting, subscribing especially, and even following me on social media. And let me know what you want me to talk about next. You want me to continue ranking these franchises, or do you want me to review certain movies? Let me know, and maybe I'll be down to do them. That's it for today. Thank you again for watching. Until next time, I'm Nick, founder of Squayo Brad Films, and I'll see you later. Peace!